The massive transport ship Stellar Wanderer docked at Proxima Military Academy, with a mechanical hiss that echoed through the crystalline corridors. Admiral Veltash stood at the observation window, his 6 eyes tracking the movement of maintenance crews as they prepared the docking bay. Behind him, the faculty council had gathered in uncomfortable silence. "They're here," announced Commander Zexiel, her voice tight with concern. The biosuit she wore made soft clicking sounds as she shifted, nervously. The first Deathworld Cadets in 400 years. Veltash nodded slowly. The decision had not been popular among the Academy staff. For centuries, Proxima had maintained the highest standards in the galaxy. Only cadets from civilized worlds were accepted species that had evolved beyond the primitive need for violence and aggression. The Academy produced diplomats, peacekeepers, and strategic commanders who solved conflicts through superior technology and careful planning. But the galaxy was changing. Recent conflicts had shown disturbing patterns. Pirates were becoming bolder, using tactics that seemed to come from nowhere. Rebel groups were employing strategies that made no logical sense, yet somehow worked. The Galactic Council's finest military minds were being outmaneuvered by what appeared to be random chaos. "Sir," Captain Mordick approached with his datapad. "The transport manifest shows 4 humans from Earth, 2 Catharians from Cathera Prime, and 3 Vulcans from the Magma systems, all from Class X Deathworlds, Earth." The name alone made several faculty members uncomfortable. Reports from that world described a planet where the dominant species had evolved not just to survive, but to thrive in conditions that would kill most galactic citizens within hours. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, natural disasters that occurred with terrifying regularity, and somehow the humans had not only survived, but had developed space travel. The docking bay doors opened with a pneumatic whoosh. The first figure to emerge was a young human male who appeared to be in his early 20s by galactic standard measurements. He had dark hair and moved with an easy confidence that immediately caught attention. This was Junho, according to the files. Behind him came 3 more humans, Minho, who seemed to be scanning their surroundings with tactical awareness, Yuna, whose posture suggested she was ready for immediate action, and Hannah, who was actually smiling as she looked around the advanced facility. What struck the observers immediately was how normal they appeared. The Academy staff had been expecting something more, obviously primitive, perhaps crude weapons or barbaric clothing. Instead, the humans wore simple, practical garments and carried standard-issue travel packs. They looked almost disappointingly ordinary. "Gravity feels light here," Junho commented to his companions as they walked across the polished floor. His voice carried easily in the thin atmosphere, and the translation matrix picked up his words for the listening faculty. "About 0.8 standard," Minho replied, testing his footing with small bouncing steps. "Should be easy to adjust to." Easy to adjust to. The faculty exchanged glances. The station's gravity was carefully calibrated to be comfortable for most galactic species, but it required an adjustment period for newcomers. These humans were adapting within seconds of arrival. The other Deathworld cadets followed. The Catharians moved with predatory grace, their scaled skin already adjusting to the station's lighting conditions. The Vulcans seemed almost disappointed by the comfortable temperature, having come from a world where the average surface temperature could melt most known metals. Academy cadets from civilized worlds gathered in the corridors to watch the newcomers. There were whispered conversations in dozens of languages, all expressing variations of the same sentiment, curiosity mixed with concern. These were the beings from the legendary Deathworld's planets, so dangerous that survival itself was considered an achievement. A Zentarian cadet named Velmer approached the group, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. He had been chosen to serve as a guide for the new arrivals, partly because his species was known for diplomatic skills, and partly because his natural armor made him feel safer around the Deathworlders. "Welcome to Proxima Military Academy," Velmer said, his voice carrying the formal tones of someone reciting a prepared speech. "I am assigned to help you adjust to station life and academic expectations." Hannah stepped forward with that same easy smile. "That's really kind of you. Are you feeling all right? You seem a little tense." The question caught Velmer off guard. He had been trying to project confidence and authority, but somehow this human had immediately identified his nervousness. "I am ... perfectly fine," he replied stiffly. "The atmospheric pressure is pretty high here," Yuna observed casually. "Takes some getting used to if you're not adapted for it. We had the same problem when we first started high-altitude training back home." Without being asked, Minho moved to Velmer aside and began showing him a simple breathing technique. "Try this pattern. It helps your body adjust faster. 4 counts in, hold 4, 6, 8 counts out." The watching faculty members found themselves witnessing something unprecedented. Instead of the Deathworld Cadets struggling to adapt to civilized conditions, they were helping their supposedly superior classmates cope with standard station environment. Captain Mordic made a note on his datapad, "Day 1, Deathworld Cadets," showing immediate environmental adaptation and unexpected social awareness, revising initial assessment timeline. He had given them 2 weeks to wash out. Now he was beginning to wonder if he had misunderstood which cadets would be struggling to keep up. The simulation chamber hummed to life as 16 cadets stood in the materialization zone. Captain Mordic watched from the control room as the holographic environment of Kepler-442b formed around them. Rocky terrain stretched in all directions, with twisted trees and strange purple vegetation creating an alien landscape. The air shimmered with heat distortion, and distant rumbles suggested unstable geological activity. "Mission parameters are now active," announced the computer's synthetic voice. "Rescue operation on Class B world. Hostile wildlife confirmed. Weather patterns unstable. Mission duration 4 hours maximum." Junho looked around at his fellow cadets with interest. The Veltorian team had immediately begun unpacking elaborate equipment cases, laying out advanced sensors, protective gear, and communication devices in neat rows. Their leader, Cadet Mortex, was consulting a digital map while making careful calculations on a portable computer. The crystalline hegemony representatives had formed a perfect triangle formation and were analyzing atmospheric readings through their biosuit. Their movements were precise and coordinated, like a well-programmed machine. They spoke in hushed tones about optimal approach vectors and risk assessment protocols. Meanwhile, the human cadets stood casually in the center of the materialization zone, apparently unconcerned by the hostile environment materializing around them. Junho carried only a basic field pack. Minho had a simple water container and what looked like a pocket knife. Hannah wore standard academy fatigues with no additional protection. Yuna had already started walking toward the mission objective. "Cadet Yuna," called Instructor Velkash over the communication system, "please return to your designated starting position. The mission briefing is not yet complete." Yuna paused and looked back over her shoulder. "I can hear you fine from here. The briefing said there are people who need rescue about 2 kilometers that way, right?" She pointed toward a cluster of rocky hills. "I figured I'd go find them." Cadet Zeekmer, a Zentarian with impressive mandibles and a natural exoskeleton, clicked nervously. His species was known for careful planning and methodical approaches to problems. "Where is she going?" "We have not completed equipment distribution or established communication protocols." Minho adjusted his pack and started following Yuna. "She's scouting ahead." "No big deal, no big deal." Zeekmer's voice rose in pitch. "The simulation parameters indicate hostile wildlife, unstable terrain, and atmospheric hazards. Proper procedure requires full environmental analysis before movement." Hannah patted the alien cadet on what she hoped was a shoulder. "Don't worry about it. Yuna grew up in the Australian outback. This is probably less dangerous than her backyard. The Veltorian team leader, Mortex, consulted his equipment readouts. According to our sensors, the atmospheric composition includes trace toxins that could cause respiratory difficulties. The temperature variance suggests possible volcanic activity. Wildlife signatures indicate predators with estimated body mass exceeding 200 kilograms. Sounds fun, Junho commented, and started walking after his teammates. Captain Mo watched from the control room as the group spread out across the simulated landscape. The alien cadets moved in careful formations, constantly checking their equipment and maintaining regular communication. The humans simply walked toward their objective like they were taking a casual hike. 30 minutes into the simulation, the first programmed challenge activated. A pack of 6 simulated predators emerged from concealment behind a cluster of rocks. They were designed to resemble a cross between earth wolves and alien hunting cats, with razor-sharp claws and powerful jaws. The simulation computer had programmed them to test cadet response to unexpected wildlife encounters. The alien cadets reacted exactly as their training had taught them. The Veltorians immediately established a defensive perimeter and began deploying anti-wildlife deterrent devices. The crystalline hegemony cadets activated their protective shields and started broadcasting warning signals. Ziegmer called for backup support and began reviewing protocols for dangerous animal encounters. Hannah looked at the approaching predators with mild interest. She picked up a fallen tree branch, tested its weight by swinging it a few times, and then charged directly at the pack. The watching instructor stared in disbelief as the human cadet engaged 6 dangerous predators using nothing but a stick, and what appeared to be complete disregard for personal safety. She moved with fluid grace, using the branch like a staff to redirect attacks and create openings. Within minutes, the entire pack had scattered, apparently deciding that this particular prey was more trouble than it was worth. "How did she do that?" whispered Instructor Velkash. According to her file, Captain Mordick replied slowly, "She grew up on a cattle ranch. Her hobby was something called extreme martial arts." The second programmed challenge came an hour later. The ground began to shake, and the simulation's artificial volcano erupted in the distance. Lava began flowing down predetermined channels while ash filled the air. This was designed to test emergency evacuation procedures and crisis decision-making under pressure. The alien cadets immediately activated their emergency beacons. Training protocols were clear. Volcanic activity required immediate extraction to prevent casualties. They began preparing landing zones for rescue transports and organizing equipment for rapid departure. The humans looked at the eruption with casual interest. Junho studied the lava flow patterns for a moment, then pointed toward higher ground. "Camp's going to be in the way of that flow. We should probably move." Without fanfare or emergency procedures, the 4 humans picked up their minimal gear and relocated their position to a rocky outcrop that offered better protection. They continued their rescue mission as if nothing had happened. Captain Mordick stared at his control displays in complete confusion. His carefully designed challenges were not even registering as problems for the Deathworld Cadets. The simulation scenarios that had challenged Academy cadets for decades were being treated like minor inconveniences. "Computer," he said quietly, "increase difficulty parameters by 50%. Warning, that level exceeds established safety protocols for cadet training." Mordick watched as Yuna casually helped an injured Veltorian cadet while volcanic ash fell around them like snow. "Do it anyway." The training ground looked like a war zone. Smoke drifted between twisted metal obstacles, while energy blasts lit up the artificial sky. What had once been the Academy's standard obstacle course was now something that would have terrified cadets from just 3 months ago. Junho crouched behind a barrier, watching his mixed squad of 7 cadets prepare for the live fire exercise. The training had evolved far beyond anything in the Academy's history books. Real energy weapons, actual explosives, and combat scenarios that pushed every safety limit the instructors could imagine. Movement ahead, Yuna whispered from her position. 20 meters forward. She had volunteered for point duty, which meant she was closest to whatever dangers waited in the maze of obstacles ahead. Her voice came through the comm system with the calm tone of someone discussing the weather. 2 Zentarian cadets, Velcor and Mortel, huddled together behind their section of cover. Their natural armor gave them protection, but their training emphasized careful planning and methodical advancement. They had spent the last 10 minutes calculating optimal firing angles and plotting safe movement routes on their tactical displays. The Hive collective drone, designated Unit 47, processed multiple data streams through its bioneural network. Its species communicated through direct mind links, sharing information instantly across their collective consciousness. Unit 47 was the first of its kind to train individually, cut off from the hive mind to learn independent decision-making. Contact, left Yuna's voice cut through the planning session. Energy blasts immediately scorched the air around their position as training drones emerged from concealment. The artificial intelligence controlling them had been programmed to provide realistic combat experience, which meant they would actually try to hit the cadets. The Zentarians dropped into defensive positions, bringing up energy shields and beginning target acquisition protocols. Unit 47 started running combat calculations while establishing communication links with nearby squad members. This was exactly the kind of scenario their training had prepared them for. Minho was already gone, while the others focused on the immediate threat. He had somehow moved from his covered position to begin scaling a vertical cliff face that bordered the training area. The rock wall was nearly 30 meters high and offered no obvious handholds, but Minho climbed it like he was walking upstairs. "Where is Cadet Minho going?" Velcor asked, through the comm system. His mandibles clicked nervously as he tracked energy blasts that were getting uncomfortably close to their position. "Flanking maneuver," Junho replied calmly, as if scaling impossible cliff faces was a normal part of military tactics. From their covered positions, the alien cadets watched Minho reach the top of the cliff and disappear over the edge. The training drones continued their programmed attack pattern, focusing on the cadets they could see, while remaining unaware of the threat. Now above them, 3 small explosions erupted behind the drone positions. The artificial enemies immediately ceased firing and powered down, their combat subroutines recognizing that they had been eliminated. The exercise computer announced the end of the engagement. "How did he disable them so quickly?" Mortel whispered, his voice full of amazement. Hannah jogged over to rejoin the group, not even breathing hard despite the intense combat they had just experienced. She was grinning with the satisfied expression of someone who had enjoyed a challenging game. Improvised explosives from training supplies. Pretty standard stuff. Standard. Unit 47's synthetic voice carried a tone of confusion that was unusual for the normally logical drone. The probability of success for that approach was less than 30%. How did he calculate the risk factors? Hannah's grin widened. He didn't calculate anything. Minho just figured it would probably work, so he tried it. The alien cadets stared at her in stunned silence. Their entire military education was based on careful analysis, calculated risks, and proven strategies. The idea of attempting a complex tactical maneuver based on it would probably work was completely outside their understanding. Captain Mordick approached the group, reviewing the exercise results on his data pad. The training scenarios had become increasingly dangerous over the past months, driven by the need to find challenges that would actually test the Deathworld Cadets. What had started as basic military education had evolved into something approaching actual combat. "Excellent work," he announced to the squad. "Though I should note that Cadet Minho's approach violated approximately 12 safety protocols." "Did it work?" Juno asked. "Yes, but then it wasn't violating protocols," Hannah interrupted cheerfully. It was improving them. Before Captain Mordick could respond, alarm klaxons began blaring throughout the station. The distinctive pattern indicated a code-red emergency, the highest threat level possible. All training exercises were immediately suspended as security alerts flooded the communication systems. All cadets report to emergency stations immediately. Came Admiral Veltash's voice over the station-wide announcement system. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Through the training facility's transparent walls, they could see explosions lighting up other sections of Proxima Station. Enemy ships had somehow penetrated the Academy's defensive perimeter and were attacking, during what should have been the safest possible time, a diplomatic summit with representatives from dozens of peaceful species. The alien cadets immediately began following emergency evacuation procedures they had memorized during their first week at the Academy. They activated personal locator beacons, gathered at designated assembly points, and prepared to be evacuated to secure areas of the station. The human cadets did something completely different. Yuna, can you get to the maintenance level? Juno asked, his voice taking on a command tone that hadn't been there during training. Already moving, came her reply from somewhere in the corridor. Minho, we need to know how many attackers, and where they're concentrated. On it, Hannah was examining the training weapons they had been using. These are set to training mode, but the power cells are real. I can probably modify them for actual combat in about 5 minutes. Unit 47 watched this rapid reorganization with fascination. You are not following evacuation protocols. Why are you preparing for combat? Junho looked at the drone with genuine surprise. Because someone's attacking our school. The zero-gravity training chamber floated in complete silence, except for the soft hum of life support systems. 8 cadets drifted in the spherical space, their movements careful and calculated as they adjusted to the absence of gravity. For most species, zero-gravity combat was one of the most challenging aspects of military training. Cadet Torvex of the Veltorian Empire checked his positioning. Thrusters for the 3rd time. His species had developed detailed mathematical models for 3-dimensional movement, with precise calculations for every angle and trajectory. He consulted his wrist computer, running numbers to determine the optimal approach vector for the combat exercise. Beside him, 2 other Veltorian cadets were doing the same thing. They moved with mechanical precision, adjusting their positions in small, controlled bursts. Their training emphasized careful planning and methodical execution. Every movement had to be calculated, every action had to follow established protocols. Yuna floated near the center of the chamber, apparently unbothered by the lack of gravity. She wasn't using positioning thrusters or consulting tactical displays. Instead, she seemed to be simply enjoying the sensation of weightlessness, occasionally pushing off walls with her hands or feet to change direction. Exercise begins in 30 seconds, announced the computer. Objective: secure the control node, located at coordinates 7-7-Mark-4. Opposition forces will attempt to prevent acquisition. The Veltorian cadets immediately began calculating approach routes. Their computers showed them optimal paths that would minimize exposure to enemy fire, while maximizing their chances of reaching the objective. The math was complex, involving 3-dimensional geometry and physics that had taken them months to master. Exercise begins now. Torvex activated his thrusters and began moving along his calculated route. His movements were precise, but slow, following the safe trajectory his computer had recommended. The other Veltorians moved in similar fashion, advancing methodically toward their target. Yuna simply pushed off from the nearest wall and flew across the chamber like a missile, but she didn't fly in a straight line. Instead, she bounced off surfaces at impossible angles, using the chamber's geometry to build momentum and change direction in ways that seemed to violate physics. She moved like she had been born in zero gravity, turning the 3-dimensional space into her personal playground. When training drones emerged to provide opposition, The Veltorians took cover behind obstacles and began returning calculated fire. Their shots were accurate, but predictable. Following standard tactical patterns, Yuna used the drone's own positions as launching points. She grabbed onto one, spun around it like it was playground equipment, and used the momentum to launch herself at another target. Within minutes, she had disabled all the opposition forces and secured the objective, while the Veltorian cadets were still calculating their second movement phase. "This is impossible," Torvex whispered to his teammate. "The trajectory calculations alone should take several minutes. How did she move so quickly without running any numbers?" From the observation deck, Instructor Velkash watched in stunned silence. The Veltorian approach to zero-gravity combat was considered the most advanced in the galaxy. Their mathematical models were perfect, their techniques were proven, and their results were consistently excellent. They had just been completely outclassed by a human who appeared to be making up her tactics as she went along. 2 days later, the diplomatic crisis simulation presented a different kind of challenge. Cadet Zarthik, of the crystalline hegemony, faced what should have been his moment of triumph. He had trained for years in negotiation protocols, studying 12 different approaches to conflict resolution. His species was famous throughout the galaxy for their diplomatic skills. The simulation presented a three-way dispute between species with completely different cultural values and communication styles. It was designed to test every aspect of diplomatic training, requiring careful application of multiple negotiation frameworks and deep understanding of alien psychology. Zarthik spent 20 minutes analyzing the cultural backgrounds of each species, consulting his database of diplomatic precedents, and preparing his opening statements according to established protocols. This was exactly the kind of challenge his education had prepared him for. Minho walked into the simulation room, listened to the three arguing species for about 2 minutes, and then started talking. He didn't use formal diplomatic language or follow any recognizable negotiation framework. Instead, he seemed to simply understand what each species really wanted and found a way to give it to them. He made jokes that somehow translated perfectly across cultural barriers. He asked questions that got to the heart of each group's concerns. Within 15 minutes, he had all 3 species working together on a solution that satisfied everyone. How did he do that? Zarthik asked his instructor afterward. He didn't follow any established protocols. He didn't even seem to know the proper diplomatic procedures. He was reading the room, the instructor replied, though she didn't sound like she understood what that meant either. The most disturbing revelation came during a complex coordination exercise involving 12 different species. Unit 47 of the Hive Collective had been specially selected for individual training, cut off from the bioneural network that normally allowed perfect communication between members of its species. The exercise required precise coordination between cadets who spoke different languages, thought in different ways, and had completely different approaches to problem solving. It was designed to be nearly impossible, testing the absolute limits of multi-species cooperation. Unit 47 watched in amazement as Junho somehow managed to get all 12 species working together, more effectively than Unit 47's own Hive Queens, managed with genetically identical drones who shared a direct mental connection. JUNHO didn't have access to bioneural networking. He couldn't share thoughts directly or coordinate through biological programming. He just seemed to understand what each species needed to hear and how to make them all work toward the same goal. Commander Zexeles stood in Admiral Veltash's office, reviewing performance data that challenged everything they thought they knew about military training. Every metric showed the same impossible pattern. Cadets from advanced civilizations were being consistently outperformed by beings from worlds that were supposed to be barely civilized. "Sir," she said carefully, "I think we need to consider that. Our definition of advanced might be wrong." Veltash studied a particular data entry. Hannah had just completed a survival exercise rated as lethal for most species. Her post-exercise comment was simple. It reminded me of summer camp back home. Summer camp, a recreational activity for children, had been more challenging than the Academy's most difficult survival test. Contact the Galactic Council, Velt said quietly. Tell them we need to completely rebuild our understanding of military education, and schedule interviews with every Deathworld cadet. I want to know what summer camp involves on their worlds. The Great Assembly Hall of Proxima Military Academy had never seen a graduation ceremony quite like this one. Traditional banners hung from the crystalline walls, displaying the ancient symbols of dozens of galactic civilizations. The formal presentation platform gleamed under artificial starlight, and representatives from 12 different species sat in carefully arranged seating sections, designed to accommodate various biological needs. But the statistics displayed on the massive screens told a story that would have been impossible to believe. Just 1 year earlier, Admiral Veltash stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled graduates. His 6 eyes tracked across the rows of cadets, noting the mixture of species that had become commonplace over the past months. Veltorians sat next to humans. Crystalline hegemony representatives shared benches with Catharians, the rigid species. Segregation that had defined Academy life for centuries had quietly dissolved in the front row. 4 humans sat with the casual confidence that had become their trademark. Junho wore the formal Academy uniform with the same easy manner he had shown on his first day. Beside him, Yuna, Minho, and Hannah looked comfortable despite the formal ceremony taking place around them. Distinguished faculty, honored guests, graduating cadets. Admiral Veltash began, his voice carrying easily through the translation matrix. Today we celebrate not just the completion of your studies, but a transformation that has changed the very nature of military education in our galaxy. He had prepared a traditional speech about duty, honor, and service. The words sat unused in his datapad as he found himself speaking from personal experience instead. 1 year ago, this academy accepted its first cadets from Class X Deathworlds. We expected them to struggle with our advanced curriculum. We expected them to require additional support to meet our high standards. We expected them to learn from our superior methods. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the alien cadets who had witnessed the reality. We were wrong about everything. The data screens showed graduation statistics that had shocked the Galactic Council. Every single Deathworld cadet was graduating with highest honors. But more importantly, alien cadets who had trained alongside them showed improvement rates that broke every historical record the Academy had kept. Cadet Torvex of the Veltorian Empire had increased his tactical effectiveness scores by 300% after being assigned to train with Yuna. His final evaluation noted that he had learned to think creatively under pressure and adapt rapidly to changing conditions. Unit 47 of the Hive Collective had achieved something its species had thought impossible: true independent decision-making. After months of training with Junho, the drone had developed individual personality traits and leadership capabilities that amaze its own Hive-Queens.car, single quotes, THEK, of the crystalline hegemony, had revolutionized his approach to diplomacy after watching Minho resolve conflicts through what the reports called intuitive psychology. His negotiation success rate had improved by over 400%. The Academy's new motto, Admiral Veltash continued, gesturing toward banners that displayed the simple phrase in dozens of languages, was suggested by Cadet Junho during what our instructors now call the impossible exercise. The phrase, adapt, overcome, survive, had replaced the Academy's traditional motto of knowledge, honor, service. The change had been unanimous among both faculty and cadets. But today, we must acknowledge that our learning has only begun. The galaxy is changing. The comfortable, predictable conflicts of the past are being replaced by chaos that requires new approaches. Our traditional methods, our careful protocols, our established strategies They are no longer sufficient. He gestured toward the human cadets in the front row, which is why I am announcing several unprecedented appointments. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Graduation ceremonies were traditionally formal affairs with predetermined outcomes. Surprises were not part of the established protocol. Cadet Yuna will be leading our new Advanced Tactical Innovation Program, developing training methods for unconventional warfare. Cadet Minho has been assigned to create our crisis psychology curriculum, teaching officers how to understand and motivate diverse species under extreme pressure. Cadet Hannah will oversee all extreme environment training, preparing our graduates for conditions that were previously considered impossible to survive. The alien faculty members exchanged glances. These appointments were extraordinary for cadets being given positions that would normally require decades of experience and advanced degrees. And Cadet Junho Admiral Veltash paused, his 6 eyes focusing on the young human who had quietly revolutionized everything. They thought they knew about military leadership. Cadet Junho has been promoted directly to instructor rank and will be designing our new core curriculum. The silence that followed was profound. A first-year cadet promoted to instructor status was completely unprecedented in the Academy's 400-year history. Junho stood and walked to the podium with the same calm confidence he had shown throughout his training. He looked out at the assembled graduate salient cadets who had started as his classmates and were now preparing to serve as officers throughout the galaxy. "Thank you, Admiral," he said simply. "I think this is going to be interesting." 6 months later, Admiral Veltash sat in his private office, reviewing reports that would have seemed like science fiction just 2 years earlier. Military academies across the galaxy were requesting Earth-style training programs. The Galactic Council had established a new classification for Deathworld combat methodology. 3 different species had requested human advisors for their military planning divisions. His personal log entry for that day captured the transformation perfectly, observed Instructor Junho, teaching advanced independent thinking to a class of Hive collective drones. They were taking notes and asking questions. The galaxy has officially been turned upside down, and somehow, that feels exactly right. The age of comfortable warfare was over. The age of Deathworld doctrine had begun, and the universe would never be the same.